Okay, prioritizing finishing this, and then I can render and clean. Chapter 16, The Return Home. By 2 bells that morning, they were all stirring their stumps, for there was a big sea running, and Toodles the bosun was among them, with a rope's end in his hand and chewing tobacco. They all donned pirate clothes, cut off at the knee, shaved smartly, and tumbled up with the true nautical roll, and hitching their trousers. It need not be said who was the captain. Nibs and John were first and second mate. There was a woman aboard. The rest were tars before the mast and lived in the forecastle. Peter had already lashed himself to the wheel, but he piped all hands and delivered a short address to them. Said he hoped they would do their duty like gallant hearties, but that he knew they were the scum of Rio and the Gold Coast, and if they snapped at him he would tear them. His bluff, strident words struck the note sailors understand, and they cheered him lustily. Then a few sharp orders were given, and they turned the ship round and nosed her for the mainland. Okay, just a second. Okay. Hey. Okay. Then a few sharp orders were given, and they turned the ship round and nosed her for the mainland. Captain Pan calculated, after consulting the ship's chart, that if this weather lasted, they should strike the Azores about the 21st of June, after which it would save time to fly. Some of them wanted it to be an honest ship, and others were in favor of keeping it a pirate. But the captain treated them as dogs, and they dared not express their wishes to him even in a round cabin. Instant obedience was the only safe thing. Slightly got a dozen for looking perplexed when told to take soundings. The general feeling was that Peter was honest just now to lull Wendy's suspicions, but that there might be a change when the new suit was ready, which, against her will, she was making for him out of some of Hook's wickedest garments. It was afterwards whispered among them that on the first night he wore this suit he sat long in the cabin with Hook's cigar holder in his mouth, and one hand clenched, all but the forefinger, which he bent and held threateningly aloft like a hook. Instead of watching the ship, however, we must now return to that desolate home from which 3 of our characters had taken heartless flight so long ago. It seems a shame to have neglected number 14 all this time, and yet we may be sure that Mrs. Darling does not blame us. Does not blame us, yeah. If we had returned sooner to look with sorrowful sympathy at her, she would probably have cried, "Don't be silly, what do I matter? Do go back and keep an eye on the children. So long as mothers are like this, their children will take advantage of them, and they may lay to that. See, so often in current times, men are actually more like children. And so the mother bears children, but the husband is still a bit like a child, craving attention and these kinds of things. Which is why it's super important to spend time on your own, to learn how to give yourself the attention that you need, so that your wife doesn't have to treat you like a child and stuff. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's what it's about. You have to become a man, responsible. Stop sucking up to the idea you have of a state. They're not your good parent. That is very clear to me, at least. Okay, don't be silly with I'm so long as mothers are like this, their children will take advantage of them, and they may lay to that. You see, it's like he himself has weird notions about mothers. So long as mothers are like this, it's like not all mothers are the same, you know. They're not with humans, whatever humans are, they're not with whatever animals are. They're all individuals. And each child is different, which means that each child also needs a different treatment. That's just the way it is. Even now we venture into that familiar nursery. Only because its lawful occupants are on their way home, we are merely hurrying on in advance of them to see that their beds are properly aired and that Mr. and Mrs. Darling do not go out for the evening. We are no more than servants. Why on earth should their beds be properly aired, seeing that they left them in such a thankless hurry? Would it not serve them jolly well right if they came back and found that their parents were spending the weekend in the country? It would be the moral lesson they have been in need of ever since we met them. But if we contrived things in this way, Mrs. Darling would never forgive us. One thing I should like to do immensely, and that is to tell her, in the way authors have, that the children are coming back, that indeed they will be here on Thursday week. On Thursday week? This would spoil so completely the surprise to which Wendy and John and Michael are looking forward. They have been planning it out on the ship. Mother's rapture, father's shout of joy, Nana's leap through the air to embrace them first. When what they ought to be prepared for is a good hiding. How delicious to spoil it all by, it's the problem. If you have a nurse, whether it's a dog or a nurse, just a nurse, this would never have happened if they would have been at home that night, right? It's just what I'm saying. I mean, you just cannot leave certain children alone. And that's just a fact. So I would have needed a lot of, not looming over me, but just attention. But I was always sent into my room. When parents want their freedom, well, now you have children. What are you talking about freedom? That's why you should stay up longer during the night and get to know yourself better. You can do this when you have children. But then stop drinking coffee and stop eating sugar and start doing your planks so you're awake. Anyway, it's not that easy, of course, but okay, this is the last stretch, my friend. Yeah. It's just a tedious topic. One thing I should like to immensely blah blah blah. Dash it all. Here are those boys again. This is also important. Mother's rapture, father's shout of joy, Nana's leap through the air to embrace them first. When what they ought to be prepared for is a good hiding. How delicious to spoil it all by breaking the news in advance, so that when they enter grandly, Mrs. Darling may not even offer Wendy her mouth. You see, this is basically my neighbors, which is why I stopped trying to engage with them. I have tried a couple of times, but everything I told them they used as a dagger to return to me. So you stop saying anything at all to some people. Some information you just have to keep to yourself. because they'll just use it to ruin something for you. So Judas isn't just one guy. It's maybe 50% or 95% of today's population. And make it 99. And maybe you'd still underestimate. Most people are just sick in their minds. How delicious. Yeah, delicious. No, you try to chew on that. You're gonna run out of fodder at some point, my person. I don't want to say friend no more. Dash it all, here are those boys again. However, we should get no thanks even for this. We are beginning to know Mrs. Darling by this time, and may be sure that she would upbraid us for depriving the children of their little pleasure. But my dear madam, it is 10 days till Thursday week, so that by telling you what's what, we can save you 10 days of unhappiness. What are you talking about? She's watching over her children. She's waiting for them to return. So that's then what a mother maybe can do. Yes, but at what a cost, by depriving the children of 10 minutes of delight. Oh, if you look at it in that way, what other way is there in which to look at it? You see, the woman had no proper spirit. What? I had meant to say extraordinarily nice things about her, but I despise her. What is this? And not one of them will I say now. She does not really need to be told to have things ready, for they are ready. All the beds are aired, and she never leaves the house, and observe, the window is open. For all the use we are to her, we might go back to the ship. However, as we are here, we may as well stay and look on. That is all we are, lookers on. Nobody really wants us, so let us watch and say jaggy things in the hope that none of them will hurt. The only change to be seen in the night nursery is that between 9 and 6, the candle is no longer there. When the children, you see, like everybody talks about Peter Pan, all this stuff, but they're missing these parts that are a bit like, what is this teaching? If children read this, what kind of ideas get into their minds? I mean, I'm not saying children should read my books, but I'm just saying, you know, it's not really there for a child would read this. It takes it literally, becomes part of it, repeats it, inherits it, passes it on. It's like the brothers Grimm nonsense. Nobody really wants us, blah blah blah. Yeah, okay, but we're also a lot of lost children. Whoa, okay. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, okay, I'm running out of it. The only change to be seen in the night nursery is that between 9 and 6, the candle is no longer there. When the children flew away, Mr. Darling felt in his bones that all the blame was his for having chained Nana up, and that from first to last she had been wiser than he. Of course, as we have seen, he was quite a simple man. Indeed, he might have passed for a boy again if he had been able to take his baldness off. But he had also a noble sense of justice and a lion courage to do what seemed right to him. His baldness probably comes from being secluded from nature, right? So if your hair falls out, then that's a sign that energy isn't flowing properly. You see? And so how some monks started to shave their head is like a tonsure. I don't know what it's called in English. This round thing that monks used to cut out. Maybe it was just that some people started getting bald. And then they just acted like they did it on purpose. And then people tried to imitate them. But it's just they're lacking the connection to nature. So energy isn't properly flowing, which is why they lose their hair. Is one way of looking at it. It's not 100% certain though. May have other reasons. Who can tell, right? What life will bring. So let us watch and say jaggy things in the hope that some... Yeah, see, but that's the problem. You know, the church was never supposed to be involved in worldly affairs, right? They should be then living in seclusion. But they started meddling, which shows that they're corrupt. They tried to change things. And that made it worse. Trying to escape suffering and stuff, you know, like individuals. They thought they were wise then. Strange. The only change to be seen, yeah, okay. Of course, as we have seen. But he had also a noble sense of justice and a lion courage to do what seemed right to him. Yeah, lion courage? I mean, yeah. Because to do what seems right to him, some people just choose what is of the least consequence to them. So what's that, a lion's courage? It's not a lion's courage, that's just a, you know, like a caged animal. I mean, you can just choose for yourself. He wanted to steal his wife away from her children, you know, to flash her around on parties. That's just stupid. Really stupid. He should have protected her. Because aristocratic family society things aren't really nice. Like, that isn't really where you should take your wife, right? I'm just saying. He jeopardized his entire family for his wish to be a part of society and mingle. You know, he could have all the wealth he had just by being with his family. But because he's a child himself, he probably felt intimidated by his own children. Of course, as we have seen, he was quite a simple man. Yeah, he's just describing himself. But who writes books like this? It's a coward. That guy's just a coward, I'm just saying. Take his boldness off, but he had also a noble sense of justice and a lion courage to do what seemed right to him, yeah. And having thought the matter out with anxious care after the flight of the children, he went down on all fours and crawled into the kennel. To all Mrs. Darling's dear invitations to him to come out, he replied, sadly but firmly, "No, my own one, this is the place for me." What are you talking about? In the bitterness of his remorse, he swore that he would never have the kennel until his children came back. Leave the kennel. Of course, this was a pity, but whatever Mr. Darling did, he had to do in excess. What's a kennel? I mean, that just shows he's a coward. He's just crawling into a hole like, ah! Yeah, he could have supported his wife, right? Chew. Yes, it's just terrible. Society is just producing cowards like nothing else. But whatever Mrs. Darling did, he had to do in excess. Yeah, accepting bribe money means you're a coward. So all politicians are cowards. Otherwise, he soon gave up doing it. And there never was a more humble man than the once proud George Darling. As he said, yeah, how many presidents do you know that have like proper beard and long hair? None of them. They're all shaved, you know, up to their armpits. right? I mean, there are no men. There are no men. They're all sucking up to the industry. It's terrible, my friend. It's really terrible, but that's the truth. It's been going on like this for a long, long time. The real men are all living their lives locally. Very touching was his difference. Okay. And there never was it's just sad to see what becomes of humanity with all this comfort nonsense. And there never was a more humble man than the once proud George Darling. Yeah, humble my ass. As he sat in the kennel of an evening, talking with his wife of their children and all their pretty ways, very touching was his deference to Nana. He would not let her come into the kennel, but on all other matters he followed her wishes implicitly. What? Are you doing the dog's bidding? You stupid. Every morning the kennel was carried with Mr. Darling in it to a cab, which conveyed him to his office, and he returned home the same way at 6. Something of the strength of character of the man will be seen if we remember how sensitive he was to the opinion of neighbors. What? Strength of character? If we remember how sensitive he was to the opinion of neighbors? Are you reading this? This is complete nonsense. This guy is a complete, like a pampered fool. And he returned home in the same way at 6. Something of the strength of character of the man will be seen if we remember how sensitive he was to the opinion of neighbors. Okay, let's read further. Maybe it isn't utter nonsense. This man, whose every movement now attracted surprised attention, inwardly he must have suffered torture, but he preserved a calm exterior even when the young criticized his little home. And he always lifted his hat courteously to any lady who looked inside. Well, you never know. You know, I get awfully judgmental sometimes, and when I catch myself. It may have been quixotic, but it was magnificent. Soon the inward meaning of it leaked out, and the great heart of the public was touched. Crowds followed the cab, cheering it lustily. Charming girls scaled it to get his autograph. Interviews appeared in the better class of papers, and society invited him to dinner and added, "Do come in the kennel." Yeah, they just want to get fun out of everything, which is why that has never changed. On that eventful Thursday week, Mrs. Darling was in the night nursery awaiting George's return home, a very sad-eyed woman. Now that we look at her closely and remember the gaiety of her in the old days, all gone now just because she has lost her babes, I find I won't be able to say nasty things about her after all. If she was too fond of her rubbishy, yeah, this is just part of the recording now, rubbishy children, she couldn't help it. Look at her in her chair where she has fallen asleep. The corner of her mouth, where one looks first, is almost withered up. Her hand moves restlessly on her breast as if she had a pain there. Some like Peter best, and some like Wendy best, but I like her best. Supposed to make her happy, we whispered, you see, you cannot listen to me for the true truth about anything, because I'm emotional. And I snap out of these things sometimes as soon as I discover being overly judgmental. It's just a place in your heart, but it's also overworking yourself to a certain degree. But I think it's also strength of character to realize what you're doing. You know, and sometimes you can do something. He could have also chose a different solution instead of sleeping in the kennel, whatever the kennel is. He could have just, well, maybe the wife was secretly depriving him, and then he shrank away. Depriving him of his love, and then he felt ashamed, like, I can never be loved again, or something. Which just shows how dependent he is on Mrs. Darling's sparkle. That's just a point. That's the point, I believe. Wow, this is a really terrible reading. Like, worse than all the others before. But it's what I got at the moment, you see? I don't have to make believe that this is always super nice. And sometimes you just have to hit the deadline. Children, she wouldn't keep it. Look at her in her chair, the corner of her eyes. Some like Peter best and some like Wendy best, but I like her best. Supposed to make her happy, we whisper to her in her sleep that the brats are coming back. The brats? It's I don't know. I cannot really identify with this author. They are really within 2 miles of the window now and flying strong. But all we need whisper is that they are on the way. Let's. It is a pity we did it, for she has started up, calling their names, and there is no one in the room but Nana. Oh, Nana, I dreamt my dear ones had come back. Nana had filmy eyes, but all she could do was to put her paw gently on her mistress's lap. And they were sitting together thus when the kennel was brought back. As Mr. Darling puts his head out at it to kiss his wife, we see that his face is more worn than of yore, but has a softer expression. He gave his hat to Liza, who took it scornfully, for she had no imagination and was quite incapable of understanding the motives of such a man. Outside, the crowd who had accompanied the cab home were still cheering, and he was naturally not unmoved. Listen to them, he said. It is very gratifying. Lot of little boys, sneered Liza. There were several adults today, he assured her with a faint flush, but when she tossed her head, he had not a word of reproof for her. Social success had not spoiled him, it had made him sweeter. Social success. For some time he sat half out of the kennel, talking with Mrs. Darling of this success, and pressing her hand reassuringly. He's actually getting a benefit out of his children's disappearance. Terrible. When she said she hoped his head would not be turned by it. But if I had been a weak man, he said, good heavens, if I had been a weak man, well, you are, because you ran away from, You cannot escape into society. If they invite you to dinners, they're actually making fun of you. They're using your family drama, which is quite emotional, to feel better about themselves. So I cannot really take his position here. And George, she said timidly, you are as full of remorse as ever, aren't you? Full of remorse? Yeah, he's getting all the attention. Why should he be full of remorse? He doesn't care, he's just parroting. Full of remorse as ever, dearest. See my punishment, living in a kennel, yeah. And you getting dinners and invited. But it is punishment, isn't it, George? You are sure you are not enjoying it? My love. Yes, sorry. You may be sure, she begged his pardon, and then, feeling drowsy, he curled round in the kennel. Won't you play me to sleep? He asked. On the nursery piano? See, he's just like a child. This is not a man. And as she was crossing the day nursery, he added thoughtlessly, and shut that window, I feel a draught. And shut that window? Oh, George never asked me to do that, so he doesn't want his children to return. You see how sick this is? This is how a lot of, families have become. They want to get rid of the responsibility. You know, they suddenly start enjoying this kind of a life. You know, suddenly he gets all the attention to himself, doesn't have to share it with these children anymore. This is really what this says. It's just the way it is. I mean, that's just sad. Many of us have raised by parents like this. Just completely selfish till the rest of their days. Always trying to get something out of something. You just have to put a stop to this. You know. Won't you play me to sleep, he asked. What? Oh, George never asked me to do that. The window must always be left open for them. Always, always. Now it was his turn to beg her pardon, and she went into the day nursery and played. And soon he was asleep, and while he slept, Wendy and John and Michael flew into the room. Oh no, we have written it so, because that was the charming arrangement planned by them before we left the ship. But something must have happened since then, for it is not they who have flown in, it is Peter and Tinkerbell. Peter's first words tell all. Quick, Tink, he whispered, close the window, bar it, that's right, now you, and I must get away by the door. And when Wendy comes, she will think her mother has barred her out, and she will have to go back with me. Now I understand what had hitherto puzzled me. Why, when I'm not sure I'm going to manage to clean today, what am I going to do instead? Maybe just wipe the surface. I feel kind of like weird. I don't know. Something's strange. This recording is really weird. But yeah, I'm not trying to give you a good time anyway. I'm just running out of trying to do that. I'll open the window. And then I'm gonna do my cleaning. Wait, that's what's missing. I need fresh air. You know? Rum! You know, open, and people are too lazy to walk. Or to just use their hands. Just make a lot of noise. That's it. That's it. You know, fresh air, my friend. Tomorrow I can leave the house. Awesome. Instead of feeling, yeah, but this sound is going to drive me insane. Ooh. Thick air, man. I like winter because people are not so lush then. Yeah, forget it. I cannot continue like this. What is this? Now I understand what had hitherto puzzled me. Why, when Peter had exterminated the pirates... I'm just gonna finish this chapter, man. It's just 2-3 more pages. Now I understand what had hitherto puzzled me. But when Peter had exterminated the pirates, he did not return to the island and leave Tink to escort the children to the mainland. This trick had been in his head all the time. Instead of feeling that he was behaving badly, he danced with glee. Then he peeped into the day nursery to see who was playing. He whispered to Tink, "It's Wendy's mother. She is a pretty lady, but not so pretty as my mother. Her mouth is full of thimbles, but not so full as my mother's was." Of course, he knew nothing whatever about his mother, but he sometimes bragged about her. He did not know the tune, which was "Home, Sweet Home," but he knew it was saying, "Come back, Wendy, Wendy, Wendy." And he cried exultantly, "You will never see Wendy again, lady, for the window is barred." He peeped in again to see where the music had stopped, and now he saw that Mrs. Darling had laid her head on the box, and that 2 tears were sitting on her eyes. "She wants me to unbar the window," said Peter, "but I won't, not I." He peeped again, and the tears were still there, or another 2 had taken their place. "She's awfully fond of Wendy," he said to himself. He was angry with her now for not seeing why she could not have Wendy. The reason was so simple: "I'm fond of her too. We can't both have her, lady." But the lady would not make the best of it, and he was unhappy. He ceased to look at her, but even then she would not let go of him. He skipped about and made funny faces, but when he stopped, it was just as if she were inside him, knocking. "All right," he said at last, and gulped. Then he unbarred the window. "Come on, Tink," he cried, with a frightful sneer at the laws of nature. "We don't want any silly mothers," and he flew away. Thus Wendy and John and Michael found the window open for them after all, which of course was more than they deserved. They alighted on the floor, quite unashamed of themselves, and the youngest one had already forgotten his home. "John," he said, looking around him doubtfully, "I think I have been here before." "Of course you have, you silly. There is your old bed." "So it is," Michael said, but not with much conviction. "I say," cried John, "the kennel," and he dashed across to look into it. "Perhaps Nana is inside it," Wendy said, but John whistled. "Hello," he said, "there's a man inside it." "It's father," exclaimed Wendy. "Let me see father," Michael begged eagerly, and he took a good look. "He is not so big as the pirate I killed," he said with such frank disappointment that I am glad Mr. Darling was asleep. It would have been sad if those had been the first words he heard his little Michael say. Wendy and John had been taken aback somewhat at finding their father in the kennel. "Surely," said John, like one who had lost faith in his memory, "he used not to sleep in the kennel?" "John," Wendy said falteringly, "perhaps we don't remember the old life as well as we thought we did." See, now that motivated me to open the windows again. So now I'm going to push this through. A chill fell upon them and served them right. "It is very careless of mother," said that young scoundrel John, "not to be here when we come back." It was then that Mrs. Darling began playing again. "It's mother," cried Wendy, peeping. "So it is," said John. "Then are you not really our mother, Wendy?" asked Michael, who was surely sleepy. "Oh dear," exclaimed Wendy with her first real twinge of remorse. You see, that's the problem with movies and stories in general. Children cannot tell the difference, which is why you have to... It's better to simply teach children real life. Movies is not real life. It's actually quite traumatizing. And in a sense, so are stories like this. This is not stuff for children. This is, escaping into daydreams. And what's the real teaching of this work? It's not really clear to me. It was then that Mrs. Darling began playing again. Okay, let us creep in, John suggested, and put our hands over her eyes. But Wendy, who saw that they must break the joyous news more gently, had a better plan. "Let us all slip into our beds and be there when she comes in, just as if we had never been away." And so when Mrs. Darling went back to the night nursery to see if her husband was asleep, all the beds were occupied. The children waited for her cry of joy, but it did not come. She saw them, but she did not believe they were there. You see, she saw them in their beds so often in her dreams that she thought this was just the dream hanging around her still. She sat down in the chair by the fire, where in the old days she had nursed them. They could not understand this, and a cold fear fell upon all the 3 of them. "Mother," Wendy cried. "That's Wendy," she said, but still she was sure it was the dream. "Mother, that's John," she said. "Mother," cried Michael. He knew her now. "That's Michael," she said, and she stretched out her arms for the three little selfish children they would never envelop again. Yes, they did. They went round Wendy and John and Michael, who had slipped out of bed, and run to her. "George, George," she cried when she could speak, and Mr. Darling woke to share her bliss, and Nana came rushing in. There could not have been a lovelier sight, but there was none to see it except the strange boy who was staring in at the window. He had ecstasies innumerable that other children can never know, but he was looking through the window at the one joy from which he must be forever barred. Yeah. In a way, he assisted in getting lots of children also to one family, right? So you cannot say that he's really bad. Is it only 17 chapters? Doing this while standing is also quite a challenge, I'm telling you this. But I really just want to push this out. Okay, now I have reached 12 pages left or so. Yeah, okay, that felt more like 40 minutes. Some of these books... Gee. And I'm supposed to do the Bhagavad Gita? I forget it. I don't think I'm really suitable for this. I mean, who should listen to this? I mean, it's quite hard to record this, but I refuse to do this again. It's not that important. I have said enough things to give you stuff to work with. You know, if you think I'm biased, then how biased are you to judge me as biased? You see what I'm saying? You hear my words, but how do I really feel like? You know, how am I in true life? I'm just reading a book, and I see things that I don't like, because I realized you cannot really blame parents for how they are, because that's how they grew up. So, you know, anyone who's watched Captain Fantastic with Viggo Mortensen, you know, at least the story, you can be really fixed on, you know, I'm going to protect my children from this sick society. But this sick society is running amok and destroying nature, which is why it is better to teach your children to also do their work in this society instead of escaping into the forest. Because if we escape into the forest, then how many children are being left to be consumed by their smartphones and stuff? So if you are strong and you've got a tough mind and you like nature, then your job during these times is to try to explain nature to people, and that there is something you can do that benefits all. We need to get back to balance. Which is why if I read about such men, I see my own life reflected upon myself, and that brings up all kinds of turbulence within me. Which is why, yeah, then sometimes, you know, I simply vent off some of these emotions by judging the characters in the story. But there's no point. You just have to accept that some men are just the way they are, which I find hard to then consider them as men. Some people who pass as adults in this society are just lost boys. And that's what I truly believe, including all politicians. They are all lost boys. You know, a huge part of them is missing. And that's what we have to change, each of us on our own. And the more that do this, the better it's going to get again. But at the moment, everything's running on electricity. So the people who are really destroying the planet because they're just out of control, I mean that as just too much chaos and then too much trauma. You know, that's the ones you can only reach through all these media. So while all of this exists, at least create content that helps to liberate people. So we can move on into a brighter future. What's brighter? It's just living life. Not sitting around looking at screens, you know. It was very interesting in the beginning, but see where it gotten us. Nobody knows what's real anymore. You know. Which is why you go around, you say to people, hey, wake up, man, what are you doing? It's like, no. They're just in this vortex, and they can't get out of it, which is why I'm constantly saying you have to turn this downward spiral into an upward spiral. And that only works if you put in the work, because you're going down. You know, that's the downward spiral. You're actually doing this by just sitting around. You know, you have to activate your body in order to channel energy properly. It has to become really firm. Really firm. Hardening. So if you've ever read or watched Akira, which is an anime or a manga, if you've read it, an anime if you've watched it, you know, he was not able to control this power. So that's what happens to people who then become famous. You know, a lot of people focus on one being. That means energy is being channeled into that being. And what does he do with it? He just goes nuts. You know, he doesn't build a commune with it. He doesn't create stability. He just creates money and buys stuff. And that's what we're trying to change. And I feel like I'm being tested in the same way. But it's not that I'm just being tested. Things are also just taken away from me. Like, you cannot buy chocolate anymore. Okay, that's really shit, you know. You just cannot buy this anymore. And every time I do, I feel like I'm being haunted. You cannot buy peanuts anymore. You gotta pick acorns from the forest. Well, that's a really tough thing to do. Because I really liked peanut butter. You know, and the first time I ate acorns, you know, I just had, diarrhea. Well, I see it as cleansing. My body has to get used to this. There's a lot of bitter stuff in there. So I'm going through a lot of changes that are hard to understand. And there's nobody here to explain anything to me. But my mind has to work this out. And I don't know what other people are doing. I feel like I'm connected to others, you know, but I'm always alone. But in my mind, it's super full. And that's just, you have to experience it, how it is to cleanse, and then to get rid of these things. I cannot talk to you about this. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. But what's even less pleasant is just living your life in a dump if you know you could change it. That's what made me just go nuts with content, because I realized, well, if I can change it, then why don't I? And so, yeah, every time I push my limits and I hit these barriers and I talk about these topics and I also read books like this and I realize there's something heavy in this, also in myself. Just what I was missing, this man in my life. And now I have to become it myself, because this man doesn't exist yet. I have to create him through choice and my actions, and that's really crazy. because that means responsibility. Well, how much? What do I have to do? I just want to have a stable life. And maybe one day I will buy peanuts again, Who knows? Who knows? And maybe I will never buy peanuts again. Right? How can I tell? I don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow, But I know that there are things we can do to change. And it is then this change that you can talk about. That's the only thing I've been talking about. How do I feel? What have I experienced? What comes up when I do this or what? But it doesn't matter to you what comes up in me. What matters to you is what comes up in you. And that's basically all. But I'm in the middle of it, and I'm talking to you about it. And that's what annoys me, that people listen to this from a safe distance, which is why, I cherish the idea that my content can get people to suffer, to experience what I've experienced, Because it's insane. It's also, it's both. It's liberating, but it's also, you don't actually want to. I don't want to keep people trapped, but it helped me. I know that feeling like you're going insane means you're just losing track of what's real. So you have to rediscover yourself. That's all there is to it. There's too much chaos. You got to keep working towards the light. So anything life throws you, you'll take it. And what life throws me is, well, you have to read the Bhagavad Gita. But I don't want to, because I don't think I'm the right guy to teach this. Because I'm just going to tear it apart, I'm just going to take this and say, well, it makes no sense. I have tried this before and that hasn't changed. So that's the next book now, and I have still one chapter left. But that's simply, I have tried already. I look at the Bhagavad Gita, I say, well, there's some stuff in it, but it's also still duality. So everything it says in there, it's not the exact truth or something. It's not an exact manual. Because it's a lot of whitewashing also. Yeah, you gotta do your duty. Yeah, but what's your duty? It's not that clear, It's really not that clear. So, in a sense, maybe it's a bit like Alan Watts said it. You just have to act on a hunch. And then you get a step further, and then you have to navigate again. Okay, how was that? I did this. What happened? Can I do this again? You try. You do it 5 more times. Suddenly it's really terrible. Well, okay, maybe you've gone a bit too far. So you have to reel it in a little. For some time it worked. Suddenly it doesn't anymore. For sometimes the best thing I could think of was buying peanut mousse and chocolate and just eating it. And then suddenly you realize I cannot do this anymore. It's just becoming like the cost is too high. It's not just the shop where you go and the money that you pay. It's something else. It's also the dependence. Right? If that's what's going to liberate me, then I'm just going to be stuck at eating peanuts all my life. Like, do I want to be responsible for, peanut trade or something? If I know I can just collect acorns, you get what I'm saying? It's just, you're going to realize that you can actually live off the land to a certain degree. And that you can collect acorns, which are basically the nuts that we have. And then you hear stuff, you read about stuff that Native Americans were known to have relied a lot upon eating acorns. Well, if you know that, Then how can you still buy peanuts if the forest is full with acorns? Plus it has all the bitter stuff that you actually need to stay balanced. Yeah, okay. Then now you have to get used to eating acorns. Okay, you know, I can try. I have roasted them. I actually like them raw better. But you can dry them. You can collect them and dry them. And there's really a lot of it. But that's work, you know. You don't just go and buy a packet of acorns. You have to pick them one by one, you know. Until you have a kilo, it's going to take some time. It's different from going to the shop and buying 500 grams of peanuts already peeled and roasted for €2.20. It's quite a difference. You just take a handful, stuff it into your mouth. Yeah. But it's also not gonna feed you, you know. You're still gonna feel empty. And that describes all the relationships I've had until now. You know, people are basically black holes. They want to create chaos for others. You know, if they get you, they smile at you. It's like, hey, you know. Yeah, okay. But what if I'm not around? You're gonna turn into dust, my friend. What if I'm not around to lift you up? You know, downward spiral until you learn to stop smoking, to stop drinking coffee, to stop eating sugar. Yeah. To stop watching movies? Yeah. If you don't do that, you're gonna land in a wheelchair in some old people nursing home. So what is Mr. Darling gonna do if Mrs. Darling would suddenly, you know, die? Maybe then he would finally man up instead of sleeping in a kennel. There's probably some kind of a dog shelter. I mean, what's that? Why? You know, man up, man. I mean, okay, what can you do? Well, he should have been more grateful. He should have just tried harder. I don't know. If he's like this, then he simply is like this. I just don't understand why you would like to continue to be like this. So get to know yourself first, so that you do not become one of these lost boys. That's some, you know, I have heard of so many women that married men that were just like children, and then they had to nurse their child and their husband. But also a lot of women I have met were simply quite weak themselves. So usually we just mirror each other. There's always a reason why two people get together. I just don't see this working. So it was simply also a consequence of my own life that I realized I have to become more stable, because what I tried before clearly didn't work. Well, maybe you first have to choose a partner in your heart, really say, okay, that's her or nothing. I mean, if something really sparks you, you gotta go for it. And then you either become stable or you keep wallowing. Yeah. And then try being alone for 2 to 3 years, not knowing what's going on with anyone you left behind. You're just working your ass off to reach the public or something, get attention, just create content, want to be heard, want to teach, but also want the teaching of teaching, you know what I'm saying? You want the exchange. You just want to be heard. You know you've got an awesome mind. So you want people to acknowledge that. Maybe you've seen, you know, seeing on a stage in a vision. Yeah, okay, reality, how does it look like? Well, I don't know, man. Just be yourself and see what happens. I cannot imagine this. I can, but I mean, how am I going to get where? What, me on a stage? How am I going to get there? I haven't had money in a long time. Like, what if I suddenly had a lot of money? How would I then get to the place, where I'd give a talk? Would I take the train? Would somebody drive me? Well, hitchhiking is out of the question. That's too crazy for me. But hiking, because it brings in the factor of someone else driving I don't know where. So I rather hike barefoot. So maybe I'll never stand on a stage. Maybe I'll just hike barefoot for the rest of my days, write books and create content and just stay in the shadows. I don't really know that. I really cannot say. Why all the English? I mean, I've been talking English, but I'm in Germany. Why am I doing this? I don't know. I have no idea, But I would take the opportunity. If life would put me on a stage, I would do what I have to do, and then it's part of my service to humanity. Hey, stop the bullshit, do your work. And how many people of the people that would listen to what I say would actually do it? 5% maybe? Yeah, I'll stick with the 1. If you reach 1% and they really start doing their job, then you've reached the ones that matter. And that's all you can ask for. So who cares for millions of followers? If you've got 1,000 and they actually engage with your content and learn something from it, I mean, that already should be worth it. So don't sell yourself for lots of people. And don't make content for someone to run away, I make content for people who want to confront their deepest fears. And for some that's being depressed, for me this is, depressed is just a low, man. Get through it. What's winter? You want to be afraid of winter all your life? No, thank you. But you can be prepared, I already know now it's going to be cold in winter, so I can prepare myself. That keeps me inventive. Anyway, last chapter.